This is Wrestling Nostalgia Dave Dynasty. Greetings, wrestling fans, and welcome to Wrestling Nostalgia. I am your host, Dave Dynasty. Thank you for joining me for another episode. We got a great guest again today. It is one of the original Andersons and a original member of the Minnesota Wrecking Crew, Lars Anderson. We'll have that interview coming up in just a bit. But before we get there, make sure you subscribe to us and follow us on social media. You can follow me on Twitter at The Dave Dynasty and subscribe to my YouTube channel, youtube.com/The Dave Dynasty. Lots of good stuff there. Some new wrestling going to be going up on there in the imminent future, so stay tuned for that. And as always, the best way to support the show financially is to buy one of our shirts. You can go to prowrestlingtees.com/The Dave Dynasty. While we're taking care of some housekeeping and some business at hand, do keep in mind that in 2024, the WFIA, the Wrestling Fans International Association, will be holding a 3-day virtual convention on September 13th, 14th, and 15th. More information will be coming, so be sure to join today for all the perks and latest news. Already has some great guests lined up. Ken Patera, the High Flyers, Greg Gagne and Jim Brunzell, a few others. So it's a very cool thing. The WFIA is a very, very great organization that I'm on the board of and I fully support. So you want to make sure you get on board, right? It's free to join. Go to thewfia.org and join the WFIA Facebook group. And that way you can keep up on everything and get all the perks of the group. So a couple little news bits that I wanted to discuss just a little bit. Everybody's talking about the fact that CM Punk recently appeared on the Ariel Helwani's MMA Hour podcast. He discussed his WWE return, his injury, a bit about his AEW departure, and it is a really, really great interview. Everybody knows I'm a Punk fan. I know he's a very divisive personality, but divisive personalities, man, are what drive professional wrestling, let's be honest. But this interview is really great, and I think it's very much worth a listen. He can't go into certain aspects of the AEW departure because of an NDA, but he does talk about a few things about his time there. But it's definitely worth a listen. So go check that out. Also, everybody knows that I'm a fan of the Dark Side of the Ring series, and this week's episode is one of them that I've been looking forward to most this season, and is the one on Harley Race. I can't wait. They put up a little teaser with some footage, some personal footage, and it's amazing. And I can't wait to see this thing. The time this drops, I will have seen it. So there you go. But check that out and support Dark Side of the Ring, man. Their shows are, they're fun. I like them. I know everybody sometimes gives them hell because it's like, we're talking about the seedy Dark Side. Yeah, well, that's what people talk about, man. People talk about that stuff, and it's not always like that. But they dive into some of those tall tales in the mythology of wrestling that we all discuss so much. But before we move on, guys, make sure you check out the Ultimate Classic Wrestling channel featuring the Savaldi Library, and it's got much, much more on there. You can go to classicwrestling.net or download the app on Roku, Amazon Fire TV, Apple TV, the Apple iOS mobile, coming soon, I believe, to Android. There's tons of stuff on here, man. Great classic footage on there. Stuff that, particularly caught my eye. Of course, there's, WWA Indianapolis, there's Detroit, ICW, Global, USWA Dallas, and so much more. There's just tons of stuff on here. More content is being added all the time. There's an upcoming, speaking of Harley Race, there's an upcoming Harley Race collection, a show that they're doing with a collection of matches and discussing his career and different things, which is really, really cool. I was, honored to be able to preview it. It's got lots of great matches, including, Harley versus Dick the Bruiser. So much more is in there. It's a great show, man. You're going to want to see it. So make sure you subscribe so that when that's dropped, you can view it. The subscription, it's worth more than the subscription, man. You're going to, hours of content on here, hours and hours. Great stuff to watch. You're going to, if you're a classic wrestling fan, and if you listen to this, I'm guessing that you are, you're going to love it. So go to classicwrestling.net and sign up now. So let's take a quick break. And when we come back, we will have that interview with a member of one of the original members of the Minnesota Wrecking Crew, Lars Anderson. So stick around. If you like horror movies, be sure to check out Dave Dynasty and Ike Isaacs on the Listen to Their Screams Horror Podcast. It It is available on all podcast platforms and on social media at Listen to Screams. That is listen, the number 2 and Screams. All right, and welcome back to Wrestling Nostalgia. This time I'm being joined by one of the original members of the Minnesota Wrecking Crew, Lars Anderson. Sir, how are you?
Doing well. How about yourself?
I am doing good. I appreciate you giving me your time. Let's dive right into it. You were an athlete when you grew up and into college. What made you decide to make the switch and dive into pro wrestling?
Well, Buddy Wolf, who I later trained and was partners with, we played football in college wrestling. And a guy by the name of Bob Rasmussen, who you probably don't know or remember, but anyway, he was an All-American at Minnesota, played at the University of Minnesota, and then he played in the Canadian Football League. And he had turned professional wrestling, or became a professional wrestler. And Vern Gagne owned the territory, AWA. And Bob was getting, more popular, and so he watched a little bit. Anyway, he was finishing up at St. Cloud State University. Buddy Wolf was talking to him about wrestling and so forth, and like in any event, I was complaining of, we were working out down in the East, and I was complaining about the job offers. It was a psychology major, double major, psychology and sociology. I was going to go into probation work. Best offer I had, I had a wife and child at the time, it was like $1,000, like a month. I said, I can't even do this. How can I do that? He said, well, you should. He said, I've been talking to Bob Rasmussen. He said, you should. And we were both wrestling, and played football and wrestled together. And said, you should try professional wrestling. I said, what? That bullshit, Anyway, Vern was then having a match. I thought about it later, and I knew Bill Casisto in the Minneapolis wrestling office. We used to swim in the summertime. He was a booker and a road agent, old-time big Green Bay Packer player. Anyway, so I called the wrestling office, and they talked to Bill, and Vern was having a match in St. Cloud at the Armory, he was on the card, so I put on, at that time I played football around 235, 240, and I was wrestling 191 national collegiates and would cut down to 177, for the national collegiate. So I put on 3 sweaters and a heavy jacket. went down to see him and told him that I was going to the San Francisco Club, the next week, and going to wrestle there. And when I got back, I'd like to talk to him. So he said, yeah, when you get back, talk, So he set up a ring at his farm. Like one of the first students, to go through his, Eddie Sharkey helped me, trained me a little bit. Gene Anderson, and later we became the Anderson brothers, and Vern would, come out a few times. So that's how it all started.
Yeah, and like you said, you came up with, trained with Vern and Sharkey and those guys in the AWA. And like you said, at 65, you became Lars Anderson when Gene was around. So how did it come up for you to become an Anderson and start teaming with Gene?
Well, Gene's, had been on the road, for a couple, 3-4 years at that time. It hadn't made any money realistically, so he convinced me, that we could become a tag team, go on the road, and then, so I said, okay, well, it sounds like something, like I can learn, as I'm making money and learn, so went to the office, and Vern booked us in Tennessee. And, I had just graduated from college in 64 and bought a new Oldsmobile convertible. And so there we were in Tennessee. Had 2 guys that would ride with, pay trans. Gene would pay trans, otherwise, and I had 1 credit card when I graduated from college. The payhouse in Tennessee, when I get home, about, matter of fact, you could even get it out, put a stamp together, get it home.
Well, you and Gene, I think you guys were working in Georgia around 68.
Right.
And they added Ole to the family. So why was the decision made to add a third brother? Why did that come up?
No, we were the way it worked out. We went from Tennessee, we were there about 6 weeks. Called Vern up and said, "Look, Vern, I love the business, but this is not working out, So he booked us with Charlotte, with Jim Crockett in Charlotte.
Yep.
We went from there. From there, we were there about 6 months, and then we went to Georgia. And then what happened was, Jim Crockett says, he had put money into the Malenko and Larry Hamilton, Missouri Mauler, push their team. He said, if we had to push the Andersons, we'd money with these guys now, the other team didn't work out. So we were in Georgia 6 months, and then we came back to North Carolina, and we were there about 6 months, and I was in Minnesota for an alumni game, alumni against a varsity, football. Yep. And I saw The Rock, Alan Rogowski, told him, he had just started, Vern had started him, he was taking him to Omaha and back and forth. And I said, well, we could, we're doing pretty well. We could bring you in as a third brother. And that's how it, so I sold the office, on the third brother concept, and Ole got off the plane, Rock got off the plane in Charlotte. And says, so who am I? And this is, well, you're Ole Anderson. What? Ole Anderson. The rest is history. The rest is history.
And am I correct? Did you guys all did you have a thing with your wrestling boots with the I think it was the maroon with the gold stripes? Was that an Anderson thing that you guys did intentionally?
In terms of the boots, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
How did that come up?
I'm sorry. Ask the question again. I'm sorry.
With your guys' boot, I've seen that you guys had your boots, right? The solid color with the gold stripes, right? The gold,
maroon and gold.
The maroon and gold.
Yeah, colors, maroon and gold.
Yeah, and that kind of became, those boots kind of became the Anderson signature.
Yeah, trademark. Yeah, right.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, and of all the Andersons, you kind of broke off and did your own thing more than probably any of them.
Right.
Maybe outside of Ole. But I mean, you went all over, right? You wrestled, singles in, Mid-Atlantic, San Francisco. You did another stint in the AWA. You were kind of all over.
Right.
When you went back to the AWA, you also teamed with Larry Henning, which is a man, it's a name that I don't think gets talked about enough, how good a worker he was. So what was it like teaming with Larry?
He was excellent, got along very well, and tried to do a little bit of the Anderson style, but Larry had his own concept of quick story, we were they put the belts on us. I forget, what year it was, but I had, hurt my ankle or my knee, and he had sprained his, we should not have been working at that point. We should have taken time off and rested and healed up, but we leaned on each other, getting to the ring and back. We were on top, and once the business, once you're on top, and then they take you off the top, it takes you sometimes half a year to get back there. So, so we suffered through it and got through it.
Yeah, but you had a lot of tag team partners in your career, right? I mean, Gene, Ole, Larry. You mentioned your friend from college,
California.
Yeah, Bob Roop. You teamed with some, all kinds of. Did you have a favorite partner, or did you just enjoy them all in a different way?
I would say, Gene, and the combination. Gene actually, he could work, but he couldn't talk. So I talked. I did I handled the microphone. At that point. But I would say he was we did our own particular style. Which people tried to emulate, but could not, because it was our style. We knew how to do it. We did it. That was it.
Yeah. I mean, it's always been talked about, right? The Anderson style, particularly, pinpointing a body part, working on it and everything else. And that started with you guys. And, that kind of became the Anderson thing, all the way through, and including in around 83, right? They brought Arn into the family. Did you ever team with Arn? Were you ever in a situation where you and Arn worked together?
No, I never met him, actually.
Oh, actually never met. Okay. Well, that kind of leads me to my next question. Around 85 in the Mid-Atlantic, Ole and Arn, they formed the Four Horsemen with Tully and Flair. and they billed Flair as the cousin of the Anderson. And at that time, I think you were in Hawaii.
Right.
But did anyone ever call you, talk to you about potentially coming back to Mid Atlantic and being part of it and doing a complete,
No.
the Horsemen as a family?
No.
I always thought,
I was doing my own thing in Hawaii at that time. Like
yeah,
part owner of the company.
yeah. I always thought it would make sense, though, right? Instead of Tully to have Lars in there, right, and have the whole family. But I'm guessing, like you said, if they'd called, you probably would have said, I'm okay.
Yeah.
Not a bad gig in Hawaii, is it?
Yeah, no, we did promoted the other islands. We did promotions on Maui and the big Lahaina and Lanai and Molokai, and then we did Samoa, New Zealand, a little bit of Australia, a little bit of the West Coast. We did San Jose and we did LA a couple times.
Yeah, yeah, and this was for Polynesian Pro, right? With
Philippines and Malaysia, yeah, Polynesian Pro wrestling.
Yeah, with the Maivias. Did you get along? I mean, I'm assuming you got along well with the Maivias, and it was a good atmosphere.
Yeah, well, it would have been my Leah Maivia because Peter had passed.
Yeah, right. Correct.
I was a Caucasian, a haole, sitting in the Paramount High Chief's chair, telling the Samoans, "No, you don't do it like this. You do it like this." So of course, like it didn't go over too well.
Yeah. And I mean, Hawaii. I mean, you were in that particular spot too there in Hawaii, where it became very noted. You got a lot of guys on their way to and from Japan, so you had that opportunity a lot.
Japan.
Yeah, it opened a lot of doors for you guys to book talent.
A lot of good talent going through.
Yeah, and while you were in Hawaii, you encountered a young Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, correct?
Yeah, he was about 10, 11 years old when I first met him, and he would come into the office, because being in Hawaii, people going through, we kept the belts in the office. We didn't let the big guys carry the belts around, so
yeah.
He would come in the office. First thing he would do, he'd go to get the belt, he'd put the belt on and parade around. Like he was the champion. I mean, it was funny. Dewey was, anyway.
Yeah, and I think he wrote in one of his books or his biography or whatever, something about how he had words with you, quote unquote, because something about, I think it was not putting a title on Bad News Allen or something.
Yeah, I wouldn't put Bad News Allen over, and he got in my face a little bit. I remember it. I don't recall it as such. His grandmother Leah, said later, don't worry about Dewey. So what are you talking about? I mean, I guess he made more of it than I he was maybe at that time around 14 or 15.
Yeah, and speaking, man, I always thought Bad News Allen, or Bad News Brown later when he was in WWF was a great talent. And
yeah, he was a good talent, easy to work with.
Yeah, very very underappreciated. And I think he kind of had that Brody aspect of him, right? He could have probably done more if he was willing to kind of take more shit, but he really stood up for himself, and didn't put up a stuff. I've obviously worked Calgary and lots of other places, judo pass.
Yeah, he worked a lot in Calgary.
Yeah. Well, Ole Anderson, obviously, he recently passed away,
right?
And do you have an Ole story to share with us that maybe people haven't heard or whatever? I mean, Ole gets this stigma of being this old, crusty, kind of hard to deal with kind of guy. What was your encounters with Ole like and working with Ole?
Well, I mean, when we were working, as a three, when let me tell you the one story when he got introduced to the Charlotte territory, we were working on Raleigh Television, which they bicycled it all around the Carolinas.
Mm-hmm.
Dean and I against Becker and Weaver, who were the office, basically the bookers for the office, So, Becker. Well, going back, I'll back up a little bit. They wanted a black star. Jim Crockett wanted a black star. He had Luther. And he'd sing. The weight about 400. Jim weighed about 450 pounds and twiddling his thumbs on his belly, saying, well, Luther is he's just not black enough, So, what? He's not black enough, he wouldn't talk to Jive and even whatever. So they brought in Sailor R. Thomas. So
Yeah.
we're working on Raleigh Television, and Becker, we're, uh, like stomping, Becker and Weaver, and we're getting the upper hand on them, then in comes this guy from, like the third Anderson, old Anderson from out beside the curtain, and jumps more on him. So all three are pounding on Becker and Weaver. Then from the outside, other curtain comes, they've never seen him before, Sailor R. Thomas. So here we are. Ollie's flying over the top rope. Lars is flying over the top. Gene's flying over the top rope. We sold out all summer long, like where we do it, like Roanoke, for example, we would do we'd do 3,000 people, maybe 2,500 to 3,000. We go outside in the ballpark, 12, 15,000 people, all black. I mean, it was like incredible. We sold out in Greenville, South Carolina, on Mondays in a row. So you start your Monday with a good payoff. Anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, I love Sailor Art Thomas. I grew up in Indiana, and he worked a lot for Bruiser there in Indianapolis.
Right.
And I always thought, again, I thought he's another underappreciated talent that doesn't get talked about enough. He was really good.
Easy to work with.
Yeah, and I got to ask you about Bruiser, because I grew up, like I said, I grew up in Indiana. A Dick the Bruiser fan. Obviously, I think you probably worked with Bruiser and Crusher, probably mostly in the AWA. Am I right?
Yeah, AWA. Yeah.
Yeah.
Had a few matches with him in the Cow Palace, not the Cow Palace, but in the amphitheater in Chicago.
Oh yeah.
Crusher,
right.
Bruiser.
So what was Bruiser like to work with? Because everybody talks about how he wouldn't sell, and when he got older and everything else. Did you find him difficult to work with?
No, he was easy. I mean, he was over him like $1 million. It's like, like real eerie experience working in Chicago. You got 12, 15,000 people in the building. Like Henning and I would come out to the ring, Bruiser and Crusher come out to the ring, and the people start chanting, we want blood. We want blood. I said, Larry, I said, what's going on here? People are nuts. Anyway.
Yeah. Welcome to Chicago.
Yeah.
So how did you come to be known as Lucious Lars?
Well, it in North Carolina, like I just sort of came up with Becker and Weaver, like the old boy named Sue, and like it sort of started around there. I don't know if I became Lucious first or they started calling me Sue. I guess they started calling me Sue after I became Lucious, So
yeah.
that's where it all started.
Well, yeah, and like you mentioned earlier, man, you were a very talented talker during your career, and did a lot of talking, obviously, for the Wrecking Crew, for the Andersons. Do you feel like maybe that's kind of what gave you the opportunity to break away a little more from Ole and Gene and do your thing?
Yeah, well, I had it with tag team wrestling. I wanted to develop myself as a single wrestler. Wanted to go home to Minnesota. Actually, a little tired of the North Carolina area. In retrospect, I probably should have stayed. But, anyway.
Yeah, well, hindsight, that's what they. But yeah, like I think it was, like you said, Gene couldn't talk as much, so you don't hear about Gene.
He couldn't talk a lot. I mean, he could. Yeah. He couldn't. He just wasn't able to express himself. Because I just we were working with the Taurus in Atlanta, and I got heavy on the college bit, like these, these ignorant Mexicans, and blah blah, like they have no ability to learn anything, So I mean, it developed plenty of heat. Believe me, a little bit too much sometimes.
Yeah, and you always hear about Gene, how tough he was, right? How he had these incredibly strong hands, and I've heard stories of him, bringing guys like Barbarian and stuff down with just a nerve pinch, right? He knew those spots. Um,
Right.
did you see a lot of that? I mean, Gene, you being able to manipulate guys, I mean, physically with nerve pinches and different things like that. Knew those
Well,
pressure points.
not as much as he probably did later in his career, but
Yeah,
he was like Gene when he first started. He started out, in the carnies,
right.
taking all challenges on, you win $100 if you beat him type of thing,
Yeah,
I mean, he was a salty. He was a good wrestler in high school. He didn't go to college, went 1 year to college, but he's as salty as they came.
yeah. It's kind of ironic, right? He couldn't talk very well, but they're in Mid Atlantic at one point. They tried to use him as a manager, and
Yeah,
I mean, it was just obviously
I,
right. There was still value in his name,
yeah,
but it's kind of ironic having a manager that really couldn't talk all that great.
couldn't talk. Yeah,
But I guess whatever. I mean, you still it was still in Anderson, right? They're still having Gene could sell a few tickets, but
I just went down to the other day. I mean, this last week. Like there are four wrestling fans. They call them so smart marks in Fort Lauderdale. Flew
uh-huh.
me in for us, and talk wrestling. It was pretty interesting, actually.
Yeah. So you just get back before lunch. So what was it you were doing again? They wanted to just they flew you what they fly you in for?
They flew me in to go out to have a steak dinner and talk wrestling. Wrestling fans
Ah,
from way back when.
that's
You know,
a
like
that's a very that's a very Japan like thing to do, isn't it? Like the yeah. Well, I mean, it's it's what it's all about, right? I mean, you got
gave me a bit
you,
of a and round trip ticket, took care of the hotels, took care of all of the expenses. So it was pretty interesting.
yeah, can't beat that.
Yeah,
Yeah. So when you look back on your career, right? I mean, and again, right, when people talk about the Andersons, I feel like Lars gets overlooked a lot. And again, maybe it's because you went out, you staked out and did your own thing a lot. And so, you didn't team as long as, Ole and Gene and those guys did. But when you look back, I mean, do you ever see anything that you would have done differently?
uh, not necessarily because I might have stayed in the Carolinas a little bit longer. That might have been, a move that I could have, done. But I was always involved in that business. I mean, I had a national T-shirt store company. I had the first national T-shirt store company living
Yeah.
in Aspen, Colorado. I had stores in New York, the first one in New York, Milwaukee, and like Chicago and Scottsdale, Arizona. And then today, I mean, after the thing that was over with in Hawaii, I developed, or with my son developed, shield and seal. So we sell vacuum sealer bags, vacuum sealer machines to the hydroponic industry on a worldwide basis. So
Yeah.
it's always sort of involved. In Minnesota, I had a bunch of apartment houses and houses that I rented out. So I mean, I'm just more business oriented at that time. So,
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it sounds like you were a little maybe a little wiser with your money and your direction than some guys, right? There was obviously a lot of guys still out there um, hurting, itching for money, right?
yeah,
Trying to recapture stuff.
yeah,
Guys that made a lot of money back in the day and just weren't wise. And I mean, it is what it is. It's one of the trappings, I guess, of the business sometimes.
yeah,
But
exactly.
yeah, you talked about right. You went to Fort Lauderdale, met those guys. Do you still, when the opportunity, the right opportunity pops up, do you still get out and do any conventions? Do you like doing those kind of things, or are you very particular about what you do?
Well, I've gone to a couple of the Cauliflower Alley. Well, I go to
Mm,
the Cauliflower Alley. I haven't gone the last couple 3 years, but I went one time to Atlanta and then one time to Charlotte. For the gathering.
yeah,
Yeah, I enjoy it. Like talk. Talk. It's just like you can't sit down and talk to about the business. But but if the guy's in the business, you tell stories back and forth, and kind of different group of people. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, yeah. Do you kind of miss that side, the brotherhood side of it, right?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, it's like it's like it was like as painful as it was sometimes. It was totally enjoyable. I mean, I would not have redone my my life again. Or redone it over because I really enjoyed. I didn't enjoy so much the traveling in the later years. Like you're
Mhm.
flying every day, and like it just reminded me of this down to Fort Lauderdale. The trips. Like a 4 hour, got held up 4 hours in Houston, and like so they had to put the dinner was supposed to be Monday night. They put it to Tuesday, and then you're sitting around all day in the hotel. What do you do? So that part I
Yeah.
don't care for, but the traveling I don't care for. But
Yeah,
I mean,
that's what I think a lot of guys struggle with, right? That adjustment to that
yeah,
that go lifestyle, and they don't know how to stop that. But
yeah,
and
exactly.
it hits a lot of those guys. But like I said, Lars, I wish more people. Not saying you're not appreciated, but I think when people talk about the Andersons, I don't think you get props enough compared to some of these other guys. And
Well,
again,
I appreciate you saying that. Yeah, it's probably
yeah,
true.
yeah, it's true. Yeah, I mean, you were one of the original Wrecking Crew, right? You laid that foundation with Gene, and because you kind of did your own thing, and then Gene and Ole did theirs. And I don't know if it's a lot of guys now when they look for film, they see a lot of Gene and Ole, and then later Arn and stuff, and maybe that's why But I think a lot of people don't forget that what Gene and Ole weren't the first. Gene and Ole weren't. It was
No,
it
they
was
were not.
it was,
No,
it was Gene and
Lars,
Lars.
Lars and Gene.
Yeah, the original Wrecking Crew, right? Yeah. So,
And
but
we developed the style. Like
yeah,
you
yeah.
developed the style, and only fit into that particular style. So
Yeah, yeah. I mean, Ole and Arn, I love them, right? And they were both great, very talented, but they were mimicking, to a degree, you and Gene's
oh yeah,
style.
no, we developed Gene and I
Yeah,
developed.
yeah, right. And it's there's something to be said for that. So, yeah, no, I'm glad we got to talk. I know we've been trying to nail this down. You're a guy, like I said, I've always wanted to talk to. I'm a huge fan of all the Andersons, but I have a deep appreciation for what you did with Gene, what you did on your own. And I think you're underappreciated. Again, like I said, you were a great talker and a great worker. And I don't think people talk about that enough. How good Lucious Lars was. And and I think it needs to be said. So
Well, thank you, appreciate that.
yeah, you're very welcome. And then so do you have a way that people can follow you out there and see what you're doing, or do you kind of try to just keep to yourself and just let the promoters, if you're at a
Well,
convention, do
like
that?
the company, like you can look up the company Shield and Seal and saveandseal.com. That's what I'm doing today is running a company on a worldwide basis.
Yeah, there you go.
We don't get into 14 years I've been doing it. We started out, like 22,000 gross sales. Like in our first year, we did last year 7.5. So we're doing
Man,
okay.
yeah, you're doing all right. Can't complain, right?
We have a factory in Gardena that produces home compostable jars and lids,
Yeah,
for the dispensaries.
yeah, kind of,
Go in
kind
the garden in 45 days they disintegrate. So anyway,
of,
it's a
kind of,
little
kind
bit
of.
different than taking pumps. Let's put it that
Yeah,
way.
it kind of makes it a little easier when you miss wrestling, doesn't it? When you're you're doing well for yourself now.
Thank you.
Yeah, again, I appreciate your time, Lars. It was fun talking to you. And maybe, like I said, I just wanted to kind of do an overview of your career, right? Not, kind of get a broad picture. And maybe down the road we can hook up again and go a little deeper on some few things. But I just
Anytime you
wanted to
want.
sounds good.
Anytime.
Like I said, I wanted people to hear the overview of the story of Lars Anderson. And I got to ask, have you ever been approached to write a book?
I have been approached, yeah, but like it's never come up exactly. Never come up totally. I just I don't know.
Well, yeah,
not,
I mean, there's obviously that's
not
a big
into
time
that part.
commitment. It's a
Yeah,
yeah, it's a
you
well,
know,
here's
one, like we talked about the Anderson style. I don't know how much time we have here, but in any event, like when Valentine Valentine got, like in the accident, the plane crash.
Yep.
He ended up in Florida Booker, and at that time, I had, I had a difference of opinion with Ole. I was in the t-shirt business, but I came back and worked in Atlanta, and had a difference of opinion with Ole about a few things, So I made bought a bunch of these tapes, sent them to Detroit, and did the interviews at WTBS and in Detroit, and like I was there one day, and my wife at the time was in New York, so I was there one day. I said, "The hell with this, I'm gone," So Ole calls me up the next day. He says, "Lars, like what happened in Detroit?" I said, "Well, it didn't work out." I said, "I didn't like the smell of the place, the way the thing was, So he said, "Well, you're totally unemployable in the wrestling business." So I said, "Okay, fine with me." So then the next day, Valentine calls me up, wants to bring me into Florida to work his style because he's the booker and in a wheelchair,
Yeah.
So I said, "Johnny, I'd be happy to come down if he's and so forth, but Ole told me I'm totally unemployable." He's, he said, "Don't worry about Ole." So they sent me a ticket. I came down. So I'd come in the locker room. Here's Lars Sanders. Put the bag down. Okay, so I said, "Okay, Johnny, what do we do?" He'd lay it out. He said, like you grab a hold, and pound on him. Don't let him go. So I mean, a whole different style. Like Rocky Johnson, Don Morocco, Pedro Morales. These guys, wanted to do different things. Not doing anything different. Boom, pound on them. Pound on them and pound on them and pound on them and hold them in a hold. The fans are sitting there, and like 15, 20 minutes, and they're pissed. The fans, because like nothing happening. And then the guy does a little move, and boom, up they come. So it's a whole different psychology, but it was a whole different learning experience. Like learned a whole different style of work.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't even touch on Florida. You had a hell of a run in Florida, right? Working Dusty, you'd work Dusty a lot down there and everything else. Man, you had when you talked about the difference of opinion with Ole, there was a time when you popped back up in Georgia, you were on TV for a few weeks.
Yeah,
and Ole and Gene were there too on TV, but they had you guys separate. You did your thing, they did, and then all of a sudden you just kind of disappeared. Was that time period when you had the difference of opinion with Ole and
started my own company.
Okay.
I got a wrestling ring made and put in a ad in the paper. Wrestlers wanted, will train, blah blah. And so there it was in Smyrna, Georgia. I had Mo Richardson movie lights put in, and I drew a company. And that was sort of that was at that particular time.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't talk about that, man. You also had a great time training guys. I mean, you did that and everything else. I mean, ran your own company like you said, and booked in Hawaii. I mean, you did a little bit of everything. But I always wondered about that because, like I said, I watched a lot of Georgia wrestling. You popped up on TV for a few weeks with some really decisive Anderson-like wins, and Ole and Gene were there, but they kept you separate. Then all of a sudden you were gone. Nothing ever. It was like they were priming for an Anderson versus Anderson feud almost. It looked like what maybe it was going to go to, and then Lars was gone.
I started my own company and went back to a little promotion in Tuscaloosa, Selma, Alabama. That part. Went up and did actually northern Minnesota, north Dakota, Wyoming, part of Colorado, part of Ontario, part of Manitoba. Like Wisconsin, Michigan, upper Michigan, Wisconsin. And then I was one freezing winter day taking a ring, some guys up to Winnipeg, got up there in the ice and snow and, 30 below zero. And I said, holy Christ, what am I doing? The co-promoter there, Walter Shevchuk, said, Peter Maivia had passed away. Leah is looking for somebody to get involved in the promotion there. And I didn't know that Maivia's at all at that point, So I said, "Where is the nearest phone?" Phone in those days. And then 2 days later, there I am in Hawaii.
In Hawaii. Yeah, when you said you went to Detroit for a day, what year was that? About?
It would have been oh god, it would have been in the 60.
Well, in any case, though,
it would have been probably 74,
okay,
76, 77. I don't know.
So you went up there, it was for the Sheik then, right?
I just went up for one. I was going to go work the territory, but I said one night was enough for me. So
yeah. I mean, I love the Sheik, but yeah, Detroit was a weird promotion. Yeah. It was kind of oddly. I mean, it
was like total chaos as far as I was concerned.
Yeah, it was different. I mean, there's
guys on the card.
Yeah. I mean, there were some good guys that came through there. Some guys that I really like because obviously some of those same guys worked in Indianapolis, but. Yeah, there was some chaos and some weird stuff going on in Detroit, and but obviously the whole territory is centered around the Sheik, and the Sheik and Bobo mostly, but so that's interesting. So, well, all right, Lars. Well, man, I think we touched a little bit on a lot of stuff, and I appreciate your time. Like I said, we'll do this again in the future and dive a little deeper on some of these things, and really we'll pick a topic. So, but I appreciate your time, Lars, and
thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Yeah. So,
ladies and gentlemen, Wrestling Fans International Association is back. That's right, the premier fan club association of the 1970s and 1980s has been revived and is back in business. Join today. It's free at thewfia.org. That's thewfia.org. You can also join us on Facebook at facebook.com/groups/WFIA 1969.
All right, welcome back to Wrestling Nostalgia. Thank you to Lars Anderson for coming on and doing that interview with me. And thank you for listening and supporting the show. Please go join the WFIA. Like I mentioned earlier, it is free. You receive a bi-monthly newsletter, lots of perks, lots of great things. So visit thewfia.org and join today. Next episode will be out next week. Watch my social media for the guest announcement. Anybody that knows me knows I'm a little superstitious. I don't announce a guest until I have recorded the interview, till it's done and in the bag, because I'm fearful that if, hey, I make an announcement, things will have to happen, reschedules, cancels, and then the interview didn't happen, and I don't like doing that. So watch my social media for the guest announcement coming in the near future. Thank you for listening. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you for supporting on social media. And until next episode, wherever you go and whatever you do, be good, be safe, and always keep on growing.